Human activities often destroy habitats, making the populations more and more isolated from one another.
Once we lose some of these species, the whole network can be at risk.
What is a butterfly?
Or insects that go through metamorphosis. So we have these different life stages. They start as eggs, and then a caterpillar hatches from the egg, and then that's where they need to be in this host plant that they can eat and develop. That they go through different stages of growth. Then they pupate, and then within the pupa they completely transform from a caterpillar to an adult butterfly. And then once the adult butterfly emerges, their main goal is to reproduce, and then the cycle starts over. It might sound weird, but butterflies are actually parasites. At least their caterpillars are parasites on their host plants. And butterflies are spread all over the world except Antarctica, and they live in all different kinds of habitats, from a rainforest in Brazil to Abisko in northern Sweden. So they are really everywhere.
Alright, so butterflies are insects that have an unusual life cycle, look cool and have important functions in the ecosystem. And how are they doing in relation to climate change and all?
We've seen dramatic declines in many butterfly populations. That's a hard fact from many reports recently.
A really recent study done in the US compiled data from 35 different monitoring schemes, and this is the most comprehensive analysis that we have to date. They find that for 2 in every 3 species, there has been, in the last 20 years, a decrease of at least 10% in the number of individuals. So now we have really strong evidence for declines in the abundance of insects, of butterflies in this case, over long periods of time.
There might be several reasons for that. But one thing is that many butterflies are specialized on certain host plants, for example. So if you have a change in the host plant composition, you have an immediate effect on the butterfly. So that's kind of visible in a way that maybe is not visible for many other organisms that are longer lived or not as eye-catching. And also butterflies, they use environmental cues for life history decisions. They use, for example, daylight length and temperature to decide now it's time to go to hibernation or diapause, as we call it. So with a changing environment, increasing temperature, maybe they delay that decision, and then or they make another generation, although the host plants are gone already because it's fall, but because it's warm, they start directly developing instead of entering hibernation. So I think the effects are quickly seen in butterflies compared to many other organism groups. And butterflies have also been studied by naturalists for hundreds of years. So we know almost all of the species. They are monitored in many ways, and people keep an eye out for butterflies, looking for them. So they also picked up changes in the butterfly community.
There have been a number of studies trying to follow populations of insects throughout several years to figure out whether we are losing insects or not. Because insect populations can vary from year to year, and that's normal, that's natural. But once we start seeing trends of fewer and fewer individuals appearing year after year, then it's a really strong signal that those species might disappear.
And why are butterflies declining?
We know that habitat loss and environmental changes are really important drivers of biodiversity loss. But so are changes in these ecological interactions within ecological communities, especially for parasitic species. Because species respond differently to environmental changes. So they might, for example, change their geographic distribution. They might start living in different places. And then if the host suddenly lives somewhere else, somewhere where the caterpillar can't find it, then the caterpillar might be at risk of extinction, local extinction, because it can't find an appropriate host.
The reasons for why a population goes into decline are always complex. So it's very hard to pinpoint, what's the reason. There could be multiple reasons for why a population go down, all the way from habitat management to grazing and the connectivity between different patches, and also genetic reasons. But the general explanation for why species become rare and why they go extinct locally is habitat fragmentation. So human activities often destroy habitats, making the populations more and more isolated from one another. And the clouded Apollo is a perfect example of that. The three areas in Sweden are too far apart. There's no natural dispersal in between them.
And why should we care?
I think there's at least two reasons for why we should take care of nature and conserve the species, avoid their extinction. The first is that it's an ethical reason. So we share this world with all the other species, and we are causing changes that are causing then their extinction. So it is our responsibility to prevent that.
There's always been a background extinction, of course. Throughout the history of life on Earth, the biodiversity has built up, and species have been formed and species have become extinct. But at the present rate, there is more extinction than speciation, and that has only happened 4 or 5 times throughout the history of life previously. And the major mass extinctions in the past, they could be ascribed to celestial impacts or major volcanic eruptions and stuff like that. But we know now that this mass extinction that we are seeing right now is caused by humans. And therefore it's important to understand what happens when habitats are lost, species become fragmented. What are the genetic processes in small and isolated populations?
Big of a problem globally is that the biodiversity crisis.
If you ask me, I think that's the biggest problem, the biggest challenge, scientific challenge. I think it's more important than cancer research, but that's me.
The second reason is a more practical reason. So we really depend on nature for our own survival. And nature is really complicated. Each species has a role in the ecosystem, and every species is connected to several other species. So if we remove one species, then that doesn't mean that we only lose a species. That means that there's a lot of changes that can happen in the ecological community. And we're not really able to predict those changes most of the time. So the more species we lose, the more larger changes we can cause in our ecosystems.
We don't know what these species that now go extinct, what they harbor, that could be beneficial for the human population in the long run. And that's, of course, a very human-centric point of view. I think we also have a responsibility to maintain the diversity that's present today. So we don't cause extinctions of animals and plants and
And
fungi.
you mentioned ecosystem services and
Yeah.
ecosystem function. We don't know the cornerstones. We know that when we remove species from the ecosystems, that they will be affected. We don't know how.
No.
And
You can just imagine what happens if we lose all pollinators. What should we feed on as humans in the future? That's going to be dramatic consequences. I think also from a personal perspective, it's sad when we lose species. I mean, what would the world look like? How fun would it be to take a walk? There are no birds singing, no butterflies flying around, no flowers to look at. How fun is that?
So I feel that we are responsible for taking care of biodiversity. After all, we humans are causing the changes that are disturbing ecosystems and causing species to go extinct. And in the case of butterflies, they are really important within their ecological communities. They provide services, for example, as pollination, but mostly they are really important food for example, birds and bats. So if we lose, because all these species are connected within these ecological networks, once we lose some of these species, the whole network can be at risk.
So the butterfly we focus on for this series, the clouded Apollo, why is that so rare?
The clouded Apollo was present all over, at least along the eastern coast, until maybe 50, 60, 70 years ago, something like that. And then probably habitat destruction then led to that they are now refined to certain areas where they still have this particular habitat that they prefer.
And this habitat destruction is most likely related to changes in agricultural practices. So it's less grazing, more intensive land use and change.
Everything is much more large scale now, so you don't have these small farms with a few animals that graze in small patches and some smaller meadows, and then this mosaic of then forest patches and bushes within these landscapes. Now it's more large scale with huge agricultural fields.
The first episode of this series is all about this endangered and in many ways weird species of butterfly, the clouded Apollo. Next episode, we'll dive deeper into the genetics research of the clouded Apollo and what even is genomics.
Without genetic diversity, evolution halts and species eventually go extinct.
So it's among the lowest diversities that we have observed in any butterfly so far.
Human activities often destroy habitats, making the populations more and more isolated from one another. This is what Niklas and I are focused on. What happens with the genetics in small populations?